Lucille Ball spent her twilight years in solitude. Here's the heartbreaking reason America's queen of comedy, the woman whose humor once united the entire nation in laughter, ultimately found herself confronting deep loneliness in her final days. The vibrant redhead who transformed the television landscape and became the first woman to run a major studio in Hollywood faced increasing isolation as her legendary life approached its final act. Once captivating the attention of over 40 million viewers every Monday evening, Lucille was now residing in a grand Beverly Hills estate, surrounded not by the friends and family who once filled her life, but by distant memories and silent trophies of success. Despite a life defined by public adoration, the number of people who came to visit her in her later years dwindled to a painful few. What led to such a somber conclusion for a woman so universally cherished? How could someone who brightened millions of lives be left with so little human connection when she needed it most? The real story behind Lucille Ball's final chapter reveals a sorrowful truth, a stark contrast to the vivacious Lucy Ricardo character that fans adored. The private experiences of Lucille were far removed from the cheerful chaos of the sitcoms that made her a household name. While Lucy was constantly entangled in adventures and surrounded by loved ones on screen, the real Lucille found her social world shrinking rapidly by the time the 1980s arrived. The once beloved hostess of parties and gatherings was retreating deeper into solitude within her Roxbury Drive residence. The reasons why are deeply moving. Born in 1911 during the Taft presidency, Lucille Ball witnessed a century of monumental change, from 2 world wars and the Great Depression to the rise of television and the dawn of the cable era. By the time she entered her 70s, many of her peers from Hollywood's golden era had already passed. The generation that had once idolized her was aging, while younger entertainers were capturing the spotlight. But generational shift was only part of the story. The roots of Lucille's late-life seclusion stretch back much further, into a childhood shaped by upheaval and emotional scars. To understand how Lucille ended up so isolated in her later years, we must first explore the foundations of her life. Born Lucille Desiree Ball on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York, to Henry Dorrell Ball and Desiree Evelyn Ball, she began life far removed from the glamour of the silver screen. Her early years were marked by instability and hardship, factors that would influence her relationships and sense of self for the rest of her life. When Lucille was just 3, her father, a telephone lineman, contracted typhoid fever and died in February 1915 at only 27. His sudden passing devastated the family, leaving Lucille's mother to raise her and her younger brother, Fred, alone. Following Henry's death, Lucille's mother found factory work to provide for her children. However, financial pressures forced a painful decision. Lucille and Fred were sent to live with their maternal grandparents, Fred and Flora Bell Hunt, in the resort town of Celeron on Lake Chautauqua. Though practical, this arrangement laid the foundation for Lucille's lifelong feelings of displacement and emotional distance. Her grandparents, strict Methodists, maintained a highly disciplined household. Fred Hunt, in particular, was known for his rigid expectations and stern demeanor. In this austere environment, Lucille was taught the importance of hard work and obedience, but she also developed a sense of emotional caution that would later influence her adult relationships. When Lucille was around 10 years old, her world was disrupted again. Her mother remarried, but her new stepfather, Edward Peterson, didn't want children in the home. Once again, Lucille was left behind, continuing to live with her grandparents while her mother built a new life elsewhere. This further deepened her feelings of abandonment and solidified the belief that love was often conditional. These early rejections planted the seeds for the emotional patterns that would echo throughout her life. Lucille would grow to be fiercely independent, yet emotionally guarded, a combination that would both propel her to success and contribute to her late-life loneliness. At just 15, Lucille convinced her mother to let her move to New York City to attend the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts. It was her first formal step toward a life in entertainment, but the beginning was rocky. Her instructors told her she lacked talent and encouraged her to pursue another path. One even told her bluntly, "Try any other profession, any other." But Lucille didn't give up. Her ability to face rejection with determination became a defining characteristic. She pushed through the early criticism, though the emotional toll of constantly proving herself would linger, subtly shaping how she connected with others. After her discouraging experience in drama school, Lucille started modeling under the name Diane Belmont, a moniker she borrowed from the Belmont racetrack. She found modest success, eventually becoming a Chesterfield cigarette girl. This marked the beginning of her transformation from small-town girl to a glamorous figure in show business. Her real break came in 1933 when she was cast as a Goldwyn girl in the Eddie Cantor musical Roman Scandals. This role brought her to Hollywood, where she began a long stretch of supporting parts throughout the 1930s. Often typecast as a showgirl or ornament in films, her comedic skills remained underutilized. It wasn't until the 1940s that Lucille began to gain recognition for her comic timing and unique delivery. Her work on the radio show My Favorite Husband highlighted her comedic potential and served as a blueprint for what would become I Love Lucy. That landmark television series catapulted her to nationwide fame, cementing her status as a beloved icon. Behind the scenes, though, the relentless drive that powered her success also complicated her personal life. Her perfectionism and need for control, traits born of childhood insecurity, often created tension in her closest relationships. Lucille learned early that survival depended on self-sufficiency and that success required perfection. These lessons, reinforced by her early hardships and career struggles, became deeply ingrained. While they fueled her rise to fame, they also made emotional intimacy difficult. Over time, these challenges shaped the nature of her interactions with others, laying the groundwork for the solitude she would face in her older years. Fame, accolades, and business success couldn't fully erase the emotional void left by her early experiences. The most pivotal and complicated relationship in Lucille Ball's life was undoubtedly her marriage to Desi Arnaz. Both a romantic and professional bond, their union would revolutionize television and build an empire. But beneath the surface, it was fraught with difficulties that would eventually contribute to her growing sense of isolation. Would you like me to continue rephrasing the rest of the script starting from Lucille's relationship with Desi Arnaz? In 1940, while working on the RKO musical Too Many Girls, Desi Arnaz, a Cuban-born bandleader and musician, crossed paths with Lucille Ball. He was 6 years her junior and embodied an exciting, exotic energy that sharply contrasted with her more conservative upbringing. The attraction between them was instant and powerful, leading to a fast-paced romance that culminated in their wedding just 6 months later in November of that same year. The onset of World War II placed an early strain on their relationship when Desi was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1943. Though he was never deployed overseas, he contributed to the war effort by entertaining troops within the United States, which still meant prolonged separations from Lucille. Once reunited after the war, the couple grew increasingly committed to finding a professional avenue they could share, not only to combine their talents, but also in an effort to strengthen their bond and avoid further separations. This shared vision ultimately gave birth to I Love Lucy, a television series that premiered in 1951 and quickly ascended to become the most-watched program in America. The show broke new ground on several fronts. It was the first sitcom to be filmed using 3 cameras in front of a live audience, the first to portray an interracial couple, and one of the earliest to incorporate a real-life pregnancy into its storyline when Lucille became pregnant. Despite their on-screen magic and professional triumphs, behind the curtain their marriage was plagued by serious difficulties. Desi's infidelities became increasingly blatant, particularly as both his and Lucille's fame continued to rise. His escalating drinking habits only worsened the tension between them. Nevertheless, their business ventures continued to flourish. In 1950, they co-founded Desilu Productions, initially formed to produce I Love Lucy. Under their joint leadership, Desilu would evolve into a powerhouse of television production, responsible for numerous successful series, including Star Trek, Mission, Impossible, and The Untouchables. However, the emotional toll of their troubled marriage proved insurmountable. On March 3, 1960, after 2 decades together, Lucille officially filed for divorce. She described their union as a personal nightmare, one that bore no resemblance to the cheerful domestic scenes they portrayed on TV. What made their separation particularly unique was that despite ending their marriage, Lucille and Desi chose to maintain a working relationship and remained emotionally connected for the sake of their 2 children, Lucy and Desi Jr. In 1962, in a groundbreaking move, Lucille purchased Desi's shares in Desilu Productions, thereby becoming the first woman in history to head a major television studio. This moment marked a turning point in her life, transitioning her image from beloved comedian to formidable business leader. The dissolution of her marriage also established patterns that would shape her future relationships and personal life. The deep sense of betrayal and emotional trauma left Lucille guarded and hesitant to trust again. leading her to invest more of herself into her career than in romantic connections. As the years went by, this emotional self-protection evolved into a sense of isolation. Moreover, the extremely public nature of both her marriage and divorce added another layer of emotional complexity. Constantly in the limelight, Lucille had to manage the conflict between her private pain and her public persona. This need to compartmentalize her emotions made authentic emotional expression increasingly difficult. While Lucy Ricardo, her on-screen character, was known for her emotional transparency and comic expressiveness, Lucille in real life became more reserved and inwardly conflicted. The emotional scars from the Desi years left an indelible mark on her personality, shaping how she navigated her later years both personally and professionally. Following her divorce from Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball stood at a pivotal junction in her life. At the age of 50, she was now a single woman overseeing one of Hollywood's most powerful studios. It was during this challenging and uncertain period that she met Gary Morton, a stand-up comedian who would become her second husband and remain with her for the rest of her life. They married on November 19, 1961, just a little over a year after her divorce was finalized. Gary, who was 13 years younger than Lucille, presented a stark contrast to the passionate but stormy dynamic she had experienced with Desi. Where her first marriage had been marked by intensity and turbulence, this new relationship offered calm, consistency, and companionship. Friends and colleagues close to Lucille at the time noted that while her relationship with Gary lacked the fiery chemistry of her past romance, it was grounded in emotional reliability and a strong sense of support. After enduring years of betrayal and heartbreak, Lucille found in Gary a sense of safety and trust that she deeply needed. He became a central figure in her life, not just as a partner, but as a caretaker and a protective presence. He took charge of many of her business responsibilities and managed her schedule, creating a buffer between Lucille and the pressures of the outside world. Their partnership extended into the professional realm as well, though it was a different kind of collaboration than she had shared with Desi. Gary took on the role of executive producer for her later television ventures, including The Lucy Show, 1962 to 1968, and Here's Lucy, 1968 to 1974. While these programs enjoyed considerable success and showcased Lucille's enduring comedic prowess, they never quite reached the monumental cultural status of I Love Lucy. This relative decline in cultural impact was something Lucille was very much aware of, and it subtly contributed to her internal struggles during this stage of her career. The Morton years also saw Lucille continuing to assert her authority as a pioneering force in the entertainment industry. After taking full ownership of Desilu Productions in 1962, she led the company into bold, innovative territory. She personally greenlit several risky and unconventional projects, including Star Trek and Mission: Impossible, series that initially faced skepticism from network executives, but would go on to achieve legendary status. In 1967, Lucille made another major business move by selling Desilu to Gulf Plus Western for $17 million, a sum equivalent to well over $130 million today. Though the sale ended her tenure as a studio executive, it secured her financial stability for the rest of her life. Despite advancing in age, Lucille never relinquished her drive. She continued performing and producing into her 60s, maintaining the same work ethic that had defined her earlier years. But the entertainment industry around her was changing rapidly. The comedic landscape of the 1970s was shaped by new voices, trends, and tastes that diverged significantly from the style that had once made Lucille a household name. This evolution in popular culture left her feeling increasingly alienated from the medium she had once helped define. By the time Here's Lucy ended its run in 1974, Lucille found herself moving further away from the cultural spotlight she had dominated for decades. After stepping away from regular television roles, Lucille Ball found herself grappling with the sudden absence of daily structure and a creative outlet, an absence that left an emotional gap difficult to bridge. This void played a significant role in the increasing isolation that came to define her later years. The real reasons behind Lucille spending her final days with so few visitors are deeply layered and profoundly sorrowful. Her well-known perfectionism, the very trait that helped make I Love Lucy a revolutionary success, had morphed into something more rigid and challenging as she aged. What's especially striking is that her tireless dedication to work, which had once elevated her to the top of the entertainment world, eventually became a source of loneliness. Even in her 70s, Lucille maintained exacting standards for herself and those around her. Meanwhile, the new wave of performers began to favor a more relaxed and informal approach to both their careers and social lives. Lucille, however, clung tightly to the formality and work ethic of an earlier generation. This widening generational divide only further isolated her from the evolving cultural landscape. Her perfectionism also extended to how she saw herself physically. Lucille became increasingly preoccupied with her looks, acutely aware of the fact that she was aging in an industry notorious for its obsession with youth, especially when it came to women. Friends recalled that she grew more and more self-conscious, often avoiding company if she felt she didn't appear at her best. This was a painful contrast to the fearless woman who once delighted audiences with her willingness to be silly and unglamorous for the sake of comedy. Health problems also contributed significantly to Lucille's growing isolation. Though she kept many of these issues hidden from the public, she dealt with a variety of health conditions as she got older. On April 18, 1989, she suffered a heart attack at her home in Beverly Hills, caused by a ruptured aorta. Her second husband, Gary Morton, rushed her to the hospital as she endured agonizing pain. The once unstoppable performer, known for her boundless physical energy and comedic flair, now found herself increasingly limited in her mobility and strength. Perhaps most poignantly, Lucille found herself facing a painful reality common to aging legends, a world that had moved on. The television industry had undergone a radical transformation since her heyday. New comedic styles, rising stars, and shifting audience preferences had taken center stage. While Lucille remained respected as a trailblazer, the spotlight had turned elsewhere. The phone rang less often. Invitations slowed to a trickle. Many of her former colleagues had either aged out of relevance or passed away entirely. Hollywood's relentless preoccupation with youth took a particularly harsh toll on Lucille. Women in the industry have long faced harsher consequences for aging than their male counterparts, and Lucille was no exception. As she entered her 60s and 70s in the 1970s and 1980s, she endured the painful shift from celebrated star to a symbol of nostalgia, a beloved icon who was increasingly sidelined. Her style of comedy, built around demanding physical routines and razor-sharp timing, became harder to perform with age. Yet fans still expected the same energy and humor, setting an impossible standard that only intensified her reluctance to perform. The contrast between how aging male and female stars were treated was stark and disheartening. Figures like Bob Hope, George Burns, and Johnny Carson continued to enjoy high visibility and cultural relevance well into their elder years. Female stars, on the other hand, often found doors closing as soon as they crossed a certain age threshold. For someone like Lucille, who had shattered so many glass ceilings for women in entertainment, this double standard was a bitter reminder of the industry's deeply ingrained inequalities. Lucille's final attempt to reclaim her place in the television world underscored these challenges. In 1986, at the age of 75, she starred in Life with Lucy, a sitcom created by Aaron Spelling for ABC. The show was highly anticipated, representing the return of one of America's most beloved performers to the small screen. Unfortunately, the series failed to resonate with modern audiences and was canceled after only 8 episodes due to poor ratings. This setback was crushing for Lucille. After a career filled with groundbreaking achievements, she was confronted with the realization that the public no longer connected with her in the same way. Friends noted that she took the show's failure very personally, seeing it not just as the end of a project, but as a painful rejection of her lifetime of contributions to the industry. Alongside this emotional blow came growing insecurity about her appearance. Lucille had long been recognized for her iconic look, the bright red hair, the animated expressions, and the infectious vitality. As time altered her physical features, she became more and more uncomfortable being seen. Friends said she would often cancel social plans if she felt she wasn't looking presentable, something that became increasingly common in her final years. This discomfort was amplified by the constant presence of her youthful image in I Love Lucy reruns, which aired around the globe. Each time a new viewer discovered the show, it was the vibrant, sprightly Lucy Ricardo they saw, not the elderly woman Lucille had become. This contrast created an emotional burden she could never shake, a ghost of her former self haunting every channel and reminding her of the distance between who she was and who she had become. In her later years, The media's intense scrutiny of women's appearances only deepened these insecurities. Lucille had never relied on conventional beauty to win over audiences. Her comedic brilliance had always been her greatest strength. Still, the pressure to appear youthful lingered, making her increasingly reluctant to appear in public. By the 1980s, her health issues further diminished her energy and confidence, causing her to turn down more social engagements and public appearances. The once thriving social life she had enjoyed began to shrink, limited to a close-knit group of trusted friends and family. What makes this stage of Lucille's life especially heartbreaking is how closely it mirrors the experiences of many women in entertainment today. The shift from being viewed as a dynamic and bankable talent to being labeled a legend often comes with an unspoken expectation to quietly fade from relevance. For Lucille, whose identity was deeply tied to her work, this transition was more than professional. It was personal, even existential. Her withdrawal from public life was not just about age or health, but about a sense of loss, both of career and of self. Hollywood's worship of youth created a cruel paradox for Lucille Ball. At the same time that her legacy was being celebrated and introduced to younger audiences through reruns, she found herself excluded from the very industry she helped build. This duality, being honored yet overlooked, created a deep emotional strain that few could understand unless they were close to her. But there was yet another dimension to her growing solitude that often goes unnoticed. Her relationship with her two children, Lucille Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr., had grown more complicated as they entered adulthood. Though they had deep affection for their mother, Lucille Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr. often navigated complex emotions when it came to their relationship with her. Both had forged their own paths, built careers, and started families. Yet the legacy of their parents' tumultuous marriage and widely publicized divorce lingered in the background of their lives. Lucille Arnaz, who carved out a respected career as an actress and singer, and her brother Desi Arnaz Jr., who experienced both triumphs and setbacks in the public eye, each bore the weight of their famous lineage. As they matured and raised their own children, staying closely connected with Lucille Ball proved emotionally taxing. Her dominant personality and firm expectations often created emotional distance rather than closeness. What may come as a surprise is how Lucille's need for control, so effective in her professional realm as a studio executive and television icon, tended to complicate her personal connections. She held strong convictions on everything from career paths to how children should be raised, and she was never hesitant about voicing her views. These firm stances often caused friction with her adult children, making family visits more strained than they might otherwise have been. Even her bond with her grandchildren, while filled with love, was impacted by the generational divide and her own declining health. Although she adored them deeply, she sometimes found it difficult to fully embody the nurturing, playful grandmotherly role that perhaps she wished she could fulfill. Ironically, the woman who had brought joy and laughter to countless households through the television screen sometimes struggled to forge deep, easygoing connections with her own grandchildren. The intricate nature of Lucille Ball's relationships with her children, Lucy and Desi Jr., adds yet another layer to the story of her later life and growing isolation. Born in 1951 and 1953, respectively, the two children were thrust into a world of fame from birth. As the offspring of the most iconic couple in American television history, their childhoods were anything but typical. In fact, aspects of their early lives were woven into the fabric of I Love Lucy, blurring the line between fiction and reality in a way that few could understand. From an early age, Lucy and Desi Jr. were acutely aware that their parents belonged not only to them, but also to millions of fans across the country. This constant attention created a difficult duality. The idealized version of the Ricardos portrayed on screen sharply contrasted with the realities of the Arnaz household behind the scenes. While the public saw an image of marital bliss, the real-life dynamics were marked by Desi Arnaz Sr.'s frequent absences, his struggles with alcoholism, and mounting marital tensions. The eventual separation of Lucille and Desi Sr. in 1960, when Lucy was 9 and Desi Jr. was only 7, signaled a profound shift in the family's structure. Although the couple tried to remain amicable for their children's benefit, the dissolution of their marriage inevitably left emotional scars. This early experience with family breakdown colored the siblings' lifelong interactions with both of their parents. Both children followed in their parents' professional footsteps, choosing to enter the world of entertainment, which only added another layer of complexity to their relationship with their famous mother. Lucille was never short on advice when it came to show business, and she possessed firm ideas about how her children should navigate their careers. Her guidance, delivered with her trademark bluntness, wasn't always welcomed, especially as Lucy and Desi Jr. attempted to forge independent identities and careers separate from their mother's overwhelming legacy. In the final stretch of her life, the most sorrowful aspect of Lucille Ball's experience wasn't merely her physical ailments, but the emotional solitude she faced. By 1989, the year she passed away at 77, many of her oldest and dearest friends were already gone. Her former husband and longtime business partner, Desi Arnaz Sr., had died of lung cancer on December 2, 1986, at the age of 69. The loss of her beloved co-star Vivian Vance, who portrayed Ethel Mertz and died in 1979, left a gaping void that was never truly filled in Lucille's life. By the mid-1980s, her health had begun to deteriorate in ways that she largely kept out of public view. Arthritis plagued her joints, severely limiting her mobility and causing chronic pain, an especially cruel fate for someone whose comedic genius had always relied so heavily on her physicality and precise movements. She began turning down appearances and events that required long periods of standing or walking. Around the same time, signs of cardiovascular problems emerged. Lucille had long been a habitual smoker, a norm among entertainers of her era, and over time, this habit contributed to symptoms of heart disease. True to her private nature, she shared these issues only with her closest friends and family. The most serious health episode occurred on April 18, 1989, when Lucille Ball suffered a dissecting aortic aneurysm at her Beverly Hills home. This condition, involving a tear in the inner layer of the aorta, is a life-threatening emergency as blood forces its way between layers of the artery. Her second husband, Gary Morton, rushed her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center after she complained of sharp chest pain radiating to her back. Although surgery was performed immediately, tragedy struck again just 8 days later. On April 26th, while still in the hospital, she suffered a second aortic rupture and passed away at the age of 77. News of her death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and around the nation, as generations of fans mourned the loss of a television legend. Despite the emotional challenges of her final years, Lucille Ball's enduring legacy stands as a powerful contrast to the personal sorrow she experienced. Her cultural and professional influence remains one of the most significant in entertainment history. The body of work she left behind continues to resonate, speaking to the timelessness of her talent and foresight. I Love Lucy revolutionized the television landscape, establishing sitcom conventions still followed today. The use of the multi-camera setup in front of a live audience, pioneered by Lucille and Desi, became a standard production method for decades. Her decision to depict pregnancy on television, at a time when even uttering the word was considered taboo, demonstrated a bold commitment to representing real-life experiences, well ahead of her time. Lucille also made history as a trailblazing businesswoman. In 1962, after buying out Desi Arnaz's share of Desilu Productions, she became the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio. In doing so, she shattered industry barriers, paving the way for future generations of female executives. Under her leadership, Desilu took creative risks on projects that other studios had dismissed. Among them were Star Trek and Mission Impossible, both of which went on to become global cultural phenomena and multi-billion-dollar franchises. Her contributions to comedy were equally groundbreaking. Lucille redefined the boundaries of what female performers could do on screen. She tackled physical comedy with a fearlessness rarely seen among women of her era, smashing the demure stereotypes traditionally assigned to female entertainers. Her willingness to contort her face, wear outrageous costumes, or hurl herself into physical gags with total abandon inspired legions of female comedians. Icons such as Carol Burnett and Tina Fey have named Lucille Ball as a major influence on their careers. Perhaps the most extraordinary testament to Lucille's legacy is the universal, cross-generational appeal of I Love Lucy. While many television hits fade into obscurity within a few decades, her show has defied the passage of time. It continues to air in over 80 countries and has been translated into dozens of languages. Young viewers, even those unfamiliar with the 1950s context in which the show was created, continue to laugh, connect, and find joy in the simple yet profound humor that Lucille brought to life. Her ability to transcend time and culture cements her status as not just a television icon, but a timeless figure in global entertainment history. Lucille Ball's portrayal of Lucy Ricardo continued to resonate with audiences long after its original airing. This ongoing relevance created a striking contrast during the final years of her life. While she grappled with a deep sense of personal isolation, her cultural influence remained as strong as ever, arguably even growing. Through reruns and syndication, new audiences continued to discover her work, sparking renewed admiration for her comedic brilliance. Despite retreating from the spotlight, Lucille was still a prominent figure in popular culture. This contrast between her solitary private life and her expanding public acclaim added a layer of poignancy to her later years. Her impact wasn't confined to just television and comedy. It extended deeply into American culture. She was a trailblazer not only as a pioneering female comedian and media executive, but also in her depiction of a mixed ethnicity marriage at a time when such portrayals were rare and potentially controversial. The fictional household of Ricky and Lucy Ricardo, featuring a Cuban-American husband and a white American wife, quietly challenged societal norms. Though the show never directly confronted ethnic issues or discrimination, its straightforward and affectionate representation of their relationship helped to normalize an image of family that was almost never shown in the mainstream media of that time. Following her passing, tributes to Lucille's groundbreaking career continued to affirm the depth of her cultural significance. In 1989, shortly after her death, President George H.W. Bush posthumously awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, praising her as a comedic genius whose innovations transformed television forever. Her legacy is also honored in her hometown of Jamestown, New York, where the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Museum draws thousands of fans each year. One of the most prominent commemorations is the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival, an annual event in Jamestown that not only celebrates her life and work, but also showcases the evolution of comedy as a vital and evolving art form. In another enduring tribute, the United States Postal Service included Lucille in its prestigious Legends of Hollywood stamp series in 2001, further cementing her place in American cultural history. The following year, TV Guide named her the greatest television star of all time, an accolade that underscores the lasting power of her legacy. These recognitions, among countless others, stand as a testament to the profound mark she left on entertainment. Though her personal life became increasingly isolated toward the end, her relationship with the broader public remained vibrant and meaningful. Lucille Ball's enduring presence in popular consciousness serves as a powerful counterpoint to the solitude she experienced in her private life. Even as her world grew smaller, the laughter she sparked continued to ripple outward, touching people across time and cultures. Her influence did not fade, it grew. The joy and humor she brought into the world have ensured that her legacy will live far beyond the final, lonely chapter of her story. Have you ever considered the striking gap between how entertainers are seen by the world and what they face behind closed doors? It's fascinating how aging celebrities are often treated differently based on their gender. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you're intrigued by the untold truths behind Hollywood's brightest stars, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the human stories behind the fame. Be sure to tap the notification bell so you won't miss any upcoming content. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.